Welcome to Crazy Good Turns. Our goal is to celebrate people who do good deeds, big or small. We discover our stories through research and with help from you, our listeners. Visit our website at crazygoodturns.org/submissions to tell us about a person or organization who's done something great for someone else. And they could be featured on an upcoming episode. As always, thanks for listening.
There were some really talented guys there that had great seasons that absolutely could have won the award as well. And what I do remember is shortly after being with my family and with my mom, we went into the little lounge, kind of where they're having this little after party. And we're kind of a musical family. And when the lady took a break, I sat down on the piano and my mom started singing and I was playing and some of the old winners came and we were singing Lean on Me. And that's a memory I'll never forget.
That's 1996 Heisman Trophy winner Danny Wuerffel, recalling the night he won the trophy after quarterbacking the Florida Gators to their first national championship title. It's a fitting way to celebrate for someone that so many have leaned on over the years. Players, coaches, fans, his family, and now inner-city communities across the South fighting to break the cycle of poverty, drugs, and violence. This is Crazy Good Turns. We tell inspiring stories about people who do amazing things for others, and I'm your host, Brad Shaw. Danny Wuerffel grew up the son of an Air Force chaplain, and like most military brats, moved often. South Carolina, Florida, Spain, Nebraska, Colorado, an experience that shaped his worldview to this day.
And I think that a couple things that really forced me to see that there's a lot of different ways that people do things in the world. And it's not that one is right or wrong, they're just different. And what a lesson that continues to come from me. But so seeing a lot of differences, having to connect and meet new friends all the time, it forces that upon you. And another piece of the story.
The Wuerffel's strong faith in God was definitional for Danny, and so was his love of sports.
My mom and dad said, before I could walk, I was playing with the ball. And so any sport I just loved. And when I was little, played a lot of soccer. And then I got into basketball. And I remember in ninth grade, I took a little fill out a survey, and they're saying, what are some of your goals? And my goal was to get a college scholarship, but I thought it'd probably be in basketball. I just kind of thought that. I didn't know, and ended up, moving to a spot where football was big, and there's a lot more 6'2" quarterbacks than 6'2" centers or power forwards, and so it just sort of evolved and had a lot of success.
Danny ended up playing quarterback at Fort Walton Beach High School in Florida, where he graduated at the top of his class. By his junior year, he was being heavily recruited by all the big football schools in the South: LSU, Alabama, Florida State, which was his top choice. That is, until he met legendary University of Florida coach Steve Spurrier.
All these other coaches would talk about these different things. I remember he sat down one time and said, this is all you need to see. And he opened up a sheet of paper, and there was just all the stats from all the quarterbacks he'd played with. And so that was one of the ways that he got you, is just showing you the success that he'd had at quarterback. And we watched some tape of some of the games that they had played. And you go, yeah, I think you could have done better here than even the guy in there right now. And so, of course, he pumped me up thinking I was all amazing, like they all do. But it was great.
Danny was redshirted his first year as a Gator, but by the following year was sharing quarterback responsibilities with a junior named Terry Dean. Danny recalls Spurrier's reaction to an interception he threw early in his college career.
So I threw it where I was anticipating he'd go, and he cut a little bit flatter, so it went over his head. It was intercepted. And, of course, if you watch football or Spurrier, the real question is who's going to get in trouble. Is the receiver going to get in trouble or is the quarterback? So we both kind of went over there wondering, and Spurrier came up to me first, so I was nervous, but he said, don't worry, Danny. It's not your fault. And right as I was having a sigh of relief, he said, it's my fault for putting you in there. You're on the bench. So, yeah, that was early on playing for Coach.
Terry Dean graduated in 1995, giving Danny the starting quarterback slot for his final 2 seasons as a Florida Gator. The team flourished under Danny's leadership, culminating in their victory over Nebraska for the national championship and Danny winning the Heisman. It was 1996 and would prove to be the pinnacle of his football career. Danny was picked up by the New Orleans Saints in the 4th round of the 1997 NFL Draft and played there for 3 years as a backup quarterback for the struggling Saints. He played football in Europe for a season and bounced around other NFL teams before retiring from football at 28 after being released from the Washington Redskins. Do you miss football now?
Some days I miss it a ton. Most of the time I'm glad not to be out there getting smashed anymore by all these grown men. But some of the things that I really loved about football, the idea of working together with a very diverse group of people for a common goal that rarely happens anywhere else. I still get that in my life and in what I'm doing, and so that piece is great. The competition, the strategy, the intensity of those moments, and the adrenaline piece. That's pretty exciting, and you do miss that for sure.
Danny's reference to the work he's doing now is in regard to Desire Street Ministries, the nonprofit he now runs. Danny's connection to Desire Street dates back to his time with the Saints and his own calling to give back to the city he then called home.
I went to New Orleans thinking, I want to be a part of something in the city, not having any idea what that could be, but wanted to see my time there not just as a football player, but somebody that could help give back. And looking back now, it wasn't one or two things. There's probably 6 or 7 random things that sort of led me to this little organization called Desire Street. Someone had mentioned it here. I saw something there. I heard something here. And then one day I randomly in the mail got a packet about this organization sent by someone I didn't know. And I was blown away just reading about this neighborhood. And off and on, the rated the worst neighborhood in the country by HUD, second largest public housing project at one point. And a guy from Georgia in 1990 moved into the neighborhood with his wife and began working with youth there with a vision to see the neighborhood transformed, led by people in the neighborhood that he was developing and growing into leaders. And I was blown away just by all that. Loved the mission, loved the model, and actually reached out myself to make an introduction. And I'll never forget the first time I drove into the neighborhood. I drove in and saw these old picture, almost like a bombed out buildings from World War II, almost like is what you pictured. Certainly thinking they were condemned, long ago, these old project buildings. And then I saw a girl walk outside holding her doll, and then it dawned on me that at least in one of those apartments she was living.
Danny began volunteering at what was then called Desire Street Academy, a private school for boys in New Orleans' impoverished Upper Ninth Ward neighborhood. He played basketball with the kids, led Bible study classes, and helped with fundraising. Upon retirement, Danny had a number of job offers to coach football, do color commentary on TV, and even run a bank. But he felt pulled in a different direction.
Well, I was very much engaged in working with Desire Street, volunteering. And towards the end of my career, I would drive down the street in our house, and every morning I would turn right to go keep training for football. But at the end of that street, I'd have to turn left to go to Desire Street. And I just noticed every morning as I got there and was turning right, it was just seemed harder and harder to keep turning right when I was like, why am I going this way when I would prefer to go this way? And I remember kind of having this revelation that, I'm going to retire and go work at Desire Street. And I remember walking into our home to announce this to my wife. She was doing the dishes, and I was expecting her to sort of brace or, whatever reaction she might have. And when I walked in, I said, "Honey, I've got something I need to tell you." She said, "Yeah." I said, I'm going to retire and work at Desire Street. And she goes, "Okay, great." And I'm like, "I thought you'd be more surprised." She goes, "Oh, no, I knew you were going to do that for a long time now." She just knew from the way we went.
Danny joined Desire Street full-time as its associate athletic director and helped with fundraising. Then Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans.
We lost everything in our home. Our home was flooded, and the ministry was flooded. And there's so many stories. You going through it, you don't know if people are alive or not. I mean, I remember when we saw the photo of our house underwater. Actually, we saw our neighbor's house, and it was covered to the roof. So we deduced we had lost everything we had. But the context was so important because at that same time, the mayor was saying there's probably thousands, if not tens of thousands, of people that had perhaps drowned and many of them in the Ninth Ward, which is where all of our friends and coworkers were, and the kids that we served. And so at that moment, there were so many people that couldn't find their loved ones, that didn't know what was going on, that were terrified. And here I was, had lost probably all the things we had, but I had my wife and I had my son. We had one child at that point, and I realized I still have everything I need. And that was a big moment where I think you relearn the difference between what's a want and what's a need. I mean, we lost all our stuff, but I had everything I needed.
Desire Street took a direct hit from Katrina, with floodwaters 8 feet high and more than $2 million in damage. While managing through the complete loss of his own home, Danny helped locate all of the school's missing students and, with borrowed vans and buses, transported them to a temporary facility in Florida. At the time, Desire Street had been going through some organizational soul-searching, and Danny said the storm was the catalyst to move Desire Street's work onto a bigger stage.
Desire Street had always had plans to grow out of New Orleans. Part of our founder Mo's vision was to impact the Ninth Ward, the Desire neighborhood, and then beyond. So we kind of been thinking about that, but constantly getting barraged with the endless needs of the community where we served. Well, this, in a sense, forced us out of New Orleans, forced us out of our neighborhood. We had people all over the country that we were trying to care for, and ended up setting up these different programs in different parts of the city. And we had a boarding school in Florida for a year, and then that moved to Baton Rouge. So it sort of forced us to consider, to think about and dream about what does it mean for Desire Street to exist, not just in one neighborhood.
Around that time, Desire Street's board made Danny executive director and tasked him with building the plan for growth and impact beyond New Orleans.
Originally, the idea was we'd go start a new Desire Street in a lot of different neighborhoods and try to grow it and fund it and see change. But as we thought through that and just observed and talked with more people, what we realized was there are already local heroes in so many neighborhoods that are doing amazing work. But in many cases, they're burning out, or they may stay in business, if you will, but they're sort of in a perpetual survival mode. There's not enough money, there's too much need, there's too many crises, and they're hanging on, and so they're not seeing a lot of the change that they hope for. And so we made a shift. It was a pretty seemingly small, but I think a significant shift, where instead of us starting Desire Streets, we would go find people already doing this sort of work, that live in the neighborhood, which adds a whole nother development, a whole nother level of challenge, that are our neighbors that are there, that are serving, and we get behind them for a 3 to 5 year period to help give them a boost to be effective, thriving, and sustainable. So that's sort of the shift we've made, where we're not running on the ground programs anymore. We're coaching and caring, developing, training, developing leaders in their organizations so that they can be successful.
Today, Desire Street Ministries, now based in Atlanta, has partnerships with a dozen urban ministries across the South, such as Trinity Family Ministries in Mobile, Common Ground in Montgomery, and Mercy Street in West Dallas. A typical engagement with Desire Street lasts between 3 to 5 years, during which the ministry's leaders work directly with Danny and his team to develop fundraising strategies, strengthen their leadership skills, build their boards, and refine their structures. It's the kind of work many urban ministries just can't get to or suffer from burnout when they try. Danny described one partner's pretty typical experience before and after working with Desire Street.
Issues with the board, struggles with the marriage, so many things about to fall apart a few years back, and then working with them both from the organizational piece, with the board, with the leader, with the family, have weathered that storm and built some stability. And now, if you look at the programs that they have since started a school. So there's actually a school there. They've got a huge housing program that's doing some great work creating houses for home ownership for people in the neighborhood. The after-school program and the summer camp they're doing is amazing. They've started a church. The influence that they're having in that neighborhood is huge, and it was a leader that was on the edge of a burnout.
Burnout came up often in my conversation with Danny and in our research for this episode. Unlike many traditional nonprofits, leaders of faith-based ministries struggle with stricter limits on funding from corporations, often have skeletal staffs, and wrestle with violence and crime in the communities they're based in. But, Danny says, when guided by a strong leader, the combination of faith and good work can have a powerful impact in a struggling community.
When you provide a program that someone can benefit from, that's fantastic, and there's a lot of need. But then, to me, the most authentic change in any capacity happens over the context of relationships. And if you can enter in relationally with people, and you can enter into their story, and you can listen to who they are as a human being, and pay attention to their particular struggles and needs, and help be there, helping share with them what I think is one of the most ultimate messages any of us can have is, we've all blown it, we've all screwed up, probably more than we know that we have, but at the same time, you are loved more than you could ever imagine. You have worth and you have dignity, and regardless of your situation, and regardless of the choices you've made, or regardless of the things that happened to you that you had no choice for, you have so much worth and matter, to be able to share that message in the context of not just words, but also the actions that you're doing, I think can really inspire a lot of hope and a lot of change in people. And so to me, there are a lot of great churches that do great work. There's a lot of great community development agencies that do great work. But when we see those things combined into one, it can be amazing.
Justina Dix runs Atlanta's Summerhill Community Ministries, serving inner-city kids in Atlanta's Summerhill, Peoplestown, and Grant Park neighborhoods. They offer after-school programs, teen job training and counseling, and team sports. And they've been a Desire Street partner for more than 5 years. Here's Justina.
I remember just being so overwhelmed. We had been running our ministry and our programs to kids for about 11 years. And, once you've done it for so long, burnout can easily happen because you see so many needs in the community. Your heart just goes and goes, and you forget to stop. You make yourself available. You hear about something else and you feel like, oh, I've got to go attend to this. I have to help this child. And so by the time Desire Street came, I was physically tired. Our staff, was poured out. Our finances were limited. We just felt like we needed to go in prayer to see if God wanted us to continue. Now, the needs were there, but the resources for us were limited. And so Desire Street came, and the first few meetings that we had, they wanted to know, what are your concerns right now? What are your needs? And that's a question I'm not used to hearing. What are your needs? When we're there to furnish the needs and to help out with the needs of the people in the community. So it was refreshing to just hear that. And I just remember Danny saying to me, Justina, you have to take time to breathe. Just breathe. And he said it so calmly. And when you are just overwhelmed and full and not sure of what tomorrow is going to bring, and someone actually reaches out to you and says, how are you doing? That was what was needed at that time.
Not long after his first meeting with Justina, Danny was forced to take a deep breath of his own when, in 2011, he was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré, a potentially life-threatening nervous system disorder.
So what happens with Guillain-Barré is your body senses a challenging substance or something, which is usually a virus, or it might be, you might get an immunization shot, and then your body reacts to that by sending out antibodies to fight it, which is correct. What happens with Guillain-Barré is, for some reason, those little antibody soldiers get the wrong coordinates and go attack the wrong thing. So instead of attacking the foreign substance, they go attack your nervous system. And typically you begin to feel paralysis from the extremities working their way up, and it can get bad enough to get into your respiratory system, and you can die if you get that bad and don't have access to a ventilator. So for me, I just recall getting out of bed one day, and when I landed off the bed, I almost fell over. I was like, wow, my legs are feeling like jello, and going down the stairs, and I tripped somewhere, and I went to land, and I just about fell over. And we went down to Montgomery to be with one of our partners who works there on the west side of Montgomery in the Washington Park neighborhood, and it just continued getting worse. And then I went to open a water bottle, and I really struggled even just to open the water bottle, and we're like, we should go to the doctors.
Thankfully, Danny responded well to the treatment and eventually recovered, but the disorder had completely drained him of his energy. Danny and his family moved in with his parents in Florida for 2 months while he regained his strength.
So that was probably harder, was after I got over the worst of it, then this longer term stretch of having to try to navigate life with very little energy, which was a great lesson, because this is what I would say. I wake up and say, what are 2 things I can do today that would be good for Desire Street? And then, what can I do to be present for my kids and my family? And looking back, you could argue that it was probably the most productive year that I had, because I didn't get distracted with all the other things that you get distracted for, but I was forced to make the main thing, and it was a great lesson. In fact, I'm glad I'm telling myself that again now. I should make some changes.
And the experience only reaffirmed his commitment to Desire Street Ministries.
The first few weeks after this diagnosis with Guillain-Barré, I got a box of cards from Justina, and what they had done was all the kids at Summerhill had written little get well cards for Danny. So I was going through all these cards, and it was so touching. So I mean, the first thing was here was I, this mighty guy that was supposed to be the one helping them, and yet I'm the one receiving love and affirmation from them. But there was 2 cards that were, something was weird, and my wife and I looked at them. What we realized was they were not meant to go to me. They were written for someone else, and so presumably the group had written these cards to 2 different people, and 2 of them got in the wrong box. And as we were reading them, we couldn't quite figure out what it was because the context was off, and these are little kids' handwriting. But when we finally realized what was happening, it was heartbreaking, because this was what the first one said. It said, "Dear Miss So-and-so, I'm sorry you were," and we couldn't figure out that word, but the word actually was raped. And she said, "But don't worry, you'll be okay, because when my dad comes home and he beats me, I always get better." And I was just floored. And then the next one was written to the same person. It said, "Dear Miss So-and-so, I'm sorry that happened to you, but you'll be okay. I have some friends who were walking home from school the other day, and it happened to them, but they're okay. So you hang in there." And my mind was just racing, trying to figure this out, because here I'm going through a struggle with Guillain-Barré, and yet I've got the best doctors in the world. I've got millions of Gator fans sending me letters of encouragement. I even had Georgia fans sending me letters of encouragement. It was this amazing experience that all these people were there for me. And then I thought about, these little kids, and like, who's there for them? And it hit me, Justina is. Justina is their hero. Justina is there for them. And by God, we're going to be there for her so she can stay there for them as long as she can.
Well, I just have to be honest with you. There are so many well-wishers, or people who have great hearts and have great intentions, and they desire to help. But the difference between some other organizations and Desire Street is that Desire Street gets very, very personal with you. They're very relational. They don't step in for a moment and then they step out and you don't see them anymore. But they were there for us at a time we really, really needed it. And they came in and encouraged us and built us up. And then they stayed.
I'm Brad Shaw, and thanks for listening to this episode of Crazy Good Turns. Go to crazygoodturns.org to learn more about or donate to Desire Street Ministries. You can also submit your ideas for extraordinary people or organizations we should feature. And stay connected with us between episodes by following us on Facebook and Twitter. This season, we're excited to announce that we're giving a $50,000 grant to the nonprofit that does the most to creatively spread their Crazy Good Turn story, a virtuous and self-reinforcing circle of gratitude. We'll announce the grant recipient at the beginning of next season. Crazy Good Turns is audio engineered by Stephen Key. Music supervision and mixing by Score in Los Angeles. Research and editing by Martine Chaussard. And a special thanks to Megan Basinger.
My faith story often feels like a turtle who found himself sitting on top of a telephone pole, and that you're really not sure how you got there, but the view is great.